One thing I thought we'd do then, before we get into the playoff matchups, is I wanted to get some of your thoughts. We can be as brief for as long as you want, depending on how interested in the all LEC teams, Dom. Because look, I will say I am famous for complaining about almost every one of these, because unfortunately, since they publish who did what votes, you can always find some that are like, why the fuck is this person not having, like, you know, I mean, there was an obvious example. I'll use this one since she actually apologised and said it was a mistake. So, for example, Shox didn't actually have Vethio anywhere on her top 3 mids. Now, she says she just forgot to put him on. Like, you know, it's one of those ones where maybe in her brain, like, she thought she'd put him already and then she's put Lars and Humanoid and the rest of it, right? But obviously, that's very shocking because, look, of all, as much as there's many debatable opinions, I think you'd be hard-pressed to say Vethio wasn't top 3 mid laner. Like, that seems a bit egregious. But that's the extreme example. There's plenty of other people, and this is the crazy one to me, Dom. Half the fucking talent had Humanoid as their number 1 mid laner. I don't know if you saw this. Like, people like Drake, they all had that as number 1. And the joke is Law didn't, but she's French. And they're all mad biased to the French players. So I don't even know if that means she would have escaped. Like, I wonder if it was a non-French player she'd have been in with. So I just wanted to get your take on this. What do you think, Tom? Because on the one hand, I have an issue, right, which is generally on talk shows, because I like to always facilitate the conversation. I don't like to shut conversations down. I'm not a fan when our mutual friend LS, he does have a trend where in this scenario, this is exactly where he would sort of just go, did you even watch the games? Like, they don't even know what they're talking, you know, you can go too far. So I don't want to, like, castigate these people totally, but I'm sort of flabbergasted, Dom. I don't really understand, like, one, how that many people had Humanoid number 1, and then the other part is, like, you tell me, you check me if I'm off on this one. Am I just so biased towards Larson, dude, that I'm just in an alternate universe where I think Larson was the second best mid? Like, I don't get how everyone's so clear that Humanoid's above him unless they're going off he's a better playoff player or some narrative like that.
Or he's just a better player in their head. Like,
yeah, overall, if they believe. Yeah, exactly. But I'm talking about specific to this split. I don't get these votes. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I think that if you are thinking about this split and the way that so I think that it goes for a couple different things. I think one, you have to list what is your criteria to be all pro. Like, are you saying like all pro is more weighted towards the end or how good the player is? Or is it like every single game of the split is equal? Meaning if you like perform well in the first 9, that is exactly equal to if you perform well in the second round robin in the back 9. So I think that really matters because if you're looking at the totality of the split, you have to have Vetio first and then Larson second and then Humanoid third. And I don't even think that any of these are even negotiable because all the other players had too many rough, like Caps' first 9 games were too bad to put him top 3. In my mind, regardless of the fact that, you know, he looks like he's coming into form again. Humanoid, probably by the end of the split, like if I'm going to watch just week 7 and week 8, and I'm going to be like, who's the best mid in LEC? Yeah, sure, I'll probably say Humanoid. That's and fine. If I'm going to say, who do I think is the best mid laner, like on a technical level, it's probably Humanoid. Like I think Humanoid will probably be the best mid laner in the playoffs, just based off his skill set. And, you know, he has that vibe to him where it's like, you've seen him do it before. You know that he has the qualities to turn it on and become a champion. And this is somebody who was the best player in all of LEC in 2021. I think he was overall just the best LEC player for an entire year. But the way that I see All-Pro is it's a regular season award based on solely the 18 games that they play. So that's why when I, you know, do those types of things, I'll always have like Vetio number 1, Larson number 2, Humanoid number 3, with Vetio being MVP because that's what happened in these games. Like if you look at a player like Humanoid played on a fucking insanely stacked Fnatic with the person that most people have coming in second in MVP voting, Hillsong, and he only won 1 more game than Vetio on Misfits. And it's like, you look at how many games that Humanoid had to like overperform and hard carry compared to like how many games that Vetio had to do that. And it's
way
like,
less. Yeah, of course.
Way less. It's not even comparable to how much Vetio had to carry on his team. So yeah, I mean, for me, I don't really view it as like All Pro is not a best player award, or it's not like coming into playoffs how I view them. It is purely how good the player was during each one of the games, and each one of those games is just 1/18th of what I am basing it off of. So for me, I can't really see how you can put Humanoid above Larson or Vetio. I think that, I mean, Larson was literally like almost flawless in the first 9 games.
Yeah, exactly.
And Vetio was almost flawless for like the entire split. So
yes,
I can't really vibe with any of those other distinctions. But I mean, the question for me is like, is it for LEC voting? Like, are all the people provided with like the same information as to like how they are supposed to, like what their vote is supposed to mean, or is it just one of those things where people just like they're like, oh, it's all pro. Like put whoever you think is all pro.
Feels like they just put names. Yeah, it doesn't feel to me like you get directed. You just get a vote slip and you put who you want. That's the vibe I get.
Yeah, which I think is like not necessarily what you want if you're actually going to like vote and you want people to like judge off the same things. Like if it is a regular split award, which is what it's always been. It's a regular split award and it's based off the 18 games, and that should be said instead of it being like, oh no, you know what all pro is. Like it's not who you think is the best. It's who did the best.
No, I'm with you totally. Like, first of all, on the humanoid point, dude, the reason I find this really egregious is because, as you say, like, assuming that we are treating all 18 games of the split as, like, equally meaningful, they all count, like, it's about performance and consistency and how many good games you have, I think it's egregious as fuck. Like, it's one thing if someone just said, look, I personally only really care about when it gets near to playoffs and, like, how you did in the last week. So if someone said that, yeah, that's a criteria where they could construct a world humanoid was better. All I'll say is this, guys, Humanoid, when he was having his worst games, Fnatic was winning all the matches. That was the beginning of the split when they were like that. Them and Rogue were the teams that were just winning all the games. Like, these were the games where he was looking mad ropey. So I agree. And except for in the latter weeks and the second half onwards, I don't get where this one's coming from at all. And then what I would absolutely say, by the way, along these lines is, I think you've nailed it, right? What I want them to do is this. I want LEC to figure out what are these awards for? Because to me, the whole purpose of these awards, and I would do this, I would either have a little bit of text on the voting slip, or I would give like a little speech in front of everyone before they go away and do their slip. And I would say something to them like, the purpose of this award is to celebrate the best players only in this regular split across all the games they played. And in fact, I'd even add this as a context. Don't do it based on how good the team is. Just try and do it based on the player. Because that way, the cool thing about an award like this is, and this is the name I'm going to bring up now, this would have been a perfect chance with how ropey some of the junglers were to give Synkrov at least the third spot. If he just got the third spot, that would really be a brilliant way to show in history. But wait, he was on one of the worst teams, but he got the third jungler. It's like, yeah, because that's how good this guy was. Instead, dude, did you see this? Like, they had like fucking like Razork or something in there. Like, what? That's the same thing again. Like, that's just because he's on Fnatic. Like, what are we doing now if someone like Synkrov can't get a top 3 spot there? Like, what are we doing at this point in time?
There's other names that I think like could be considered for that spot. Like, I think Marcoon would be a very interesting person to throw in there. I think he had like pretty consistent performance.
Apologies, it was Elyoya they put third actually.
Yeah, I can't really see Elyoya. I mean, Elyoya had so many weird games, but yeah, I mean, like Marcoon would have been an interesting name. Like for me, I would have had, like, if I'm going for based off just this split, I think Marcoon is a name I would have thrown in there. Like, even though Schlatten played a lot of Lee Sin, I mean, that can't be something that you're eliminating him on.
You're allowed to be good Lee Sin play. Yeah, of course.
If you're playing, like, if in your 18 games, you're playing 9 or 10 of them on Lee Sin and you're fucking smashing it on it, why not? I mean, Shadow did the same thing and he was awarded, I believe, third team before. Yeah, and then the other person I would have was Synkrov. Like, I think that those would be the next 3 people in my mind. I mean, I think Razork played better towards the end, but I think his like first 9 games left a ton to be desired. I think there was a lot of things that could be desired, and I think Razork is probably somebody that I'm more critical on because I got pressed pretty hard by Veteran on my opinion. So I went through the games specifically, and I was like, no, he's actually just having like bad games. He's having bad games compared to what his level is, and Razork's an amazing player, you know. So I think that in general, like, he is somebody who I would think is a top 3 jungler. And like, I mean, I would probably say Elyoya is also a top 3 jungler. If I'm actually thinking to myself, who do I think are the best 3 junglers in LEC right now? I'll probably have, because I actually don't I think Malrong is somebody who needs to be top 3 because he was too good in some of the games. But like in terms of skill level, with his playstyle and like the volatility that it creates, I don't actually think he's as good of a jungler as
Dom. If
Elyoya, Razork, or Jankos.
So here's the question. If I asked you, I think this is the question that you're talking about basically. If I said to you, make a team tomorrow, which jungler do you start with? Malrong's bottom of that list.
Yes, definitely. So I would probably have Jankos number 1. I would have Elyoya number 2 and Razork number 3. Those would be like my picks.
That's fair.
But it's just like, that's not what happened in the split. Like Elyoya had a bad split. He had a bad split, but he's a really good player. But that's just like, that is why you have these all-pro votes. And that's one thing that I would put as a criteria for the vote, or I would put as like information on it, is like eliminate historical context from this vote. I think historical context should not be considered at all in this specific vote, because of the fact that, you know, you're doing a split all-pro team. You're not doing a year all-pro team or any of that.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll even say as well, along those lines, let me think. Yeah, that's exactly the way I think as well, mate. Like, the problem is, I even fall into it myself, but the difference is I sort of, like you say, I have my criteria set and I can drag myself back to it like a compass. Because I'll give you an example for me. If we're going to do the approach they're taking, which seems to be, if you're just on a team that makes playoffs and you historically were really good, they can sort of fudge your performance and just go, yeah, he's top 3. Well, by that logic, why is my boy Alfari on there then? Because if you actually watch the games, he didn't have that many good games, did he? Like, yes, historically, he would be the best. Yes, his team is in the play. Like, you see my point? Like, it would be a stretch to have him, like, number fucking 2 or something, wouldn't it? Like,
I mean, I feel like if you're doing top lane, I don't even think you have many options. I think if you're doing, like, top lane, top 3, you have to have BB and Odo Omne top 2, and you can reverse these orders. Like, you can be like Odo 1 or BB number 1, because what you do is you'd be like, oh, well, BB had to carry more games, like he had more standout performances, but Odo was more consistent. So like that could be preference, and I think either one, based on like what you view as a person, could be correct. So I think that is like whatever order you have those 2 in, I think is completely acceptable, because they both were the best 2 top laners in LEC. And then I think the third one would have to be Wonder, based off his performance. I mean, he was so consistent. And he played like such like a solid weak side role for most of the split. I mean, he had like a couple bad games. He had like some games where he was like inting on a Akali or whatever. But I think overall, I think he has to be third. I think those have to be your top 3 based off the split. I don't see how you could throw Alfari. I mean, Alfari had some good games, but he had a lot of like weird games, and he had some like, I mean, he had some good laning, and then in those same games he would have some bad out of lane plays. So I just feel like Vitality, I mean, wasn't consistent enough to put any of their players top 3 this split. Like, there was just so many games where Vitality just looked terrible as a whole.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.